All right, all right, all right. Hey, what's up, everyone? What's up, Orlik, Varrock, and so on. The Weltraumpräsident is even here. Even the Doofies tuning in. Today, we're gonna talk a lot about a war that might not, people might not be aware of that's going on at the moment. Has been going on for at least, and you guys can correct me, I think at least a month, if not a little longer, right? Usually wars like that kick off with a couple skirmishes, and then someone's testing the waters, and then they go in, and I think that's what happened there too. But you guys can tell me all about it in a minute, because I actually didn't pay too much attention for obvious reasons. We're all a little distracted, okay? I think your war is actually the better one, to be quite honest. Like, you guys have probably way more fun than me. But hey, both Helsir and Murray are FCs for Road Capel. Obviously, there's other groups involved, which you should also, maybe that's in a minute, you should probably explain who else is involved. Road Capel, or Rote Kapelle, if you're German, you would say it like that. Because it is a kind of German word, right? Is it a German?
I don't know
where it's coming from.
Historical. We pulled the wiki article. It's from World War II.
All right.
It's about a Russian spy group.
The Russian spy group?
Yeah, the Rokapel's the name for said Russian spy group.
Isn't that like Red Hat?
Red Chapel.
Yeah. But yeah, a little smaller group, a little bit of a smaller group. I think you guys have been growing lately, but I think most people just know you for smaller scale skills, and then where I know your name from the most is probably the AT, to be honest. Because Road Capel was always involved. I'm not sure if you ever won it, but I think you always got into the top 16 or so, right? You've got some AT experience, but no.
I'd say of the recent generation, it's been top 16. I guess it depends how you cut it on the results. So they never really, I don't know if they ever really posted how you would from, I guess, the wins versus losses and who you beat, but top 16, maybe 9 through 12. I don't honestly recall, but in that general vicinity.
Yeah. And then, so Murray has been on before, leading up to the CSM elections. That's quite a long time ago by now, almost a year, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like this. And you have been very active ever since, on other podcasts too, and getting involved and stuff. You love discussing what should be changed and all that stuff, which a CSM guy should be doing, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is I like talking to you.
Aww. And so Helsir, you have been actually writing updates, if I understand. It's you writing those updates, right? On that
that's
one?
Correct.
And you guys even launched a site for it, which is
rare that you see something like this. I think it was a boss guy launched it, but yeah.
So a boss guy. So who else is involved in that war, and how did it even start?
So so from the war report initially on the week 1 and 2, but essentially Norse hit us up. Well, hit a Diplo up Sven, and that was December 29th, and pretty much gave us the option to sell Athenors and Tataras. No Sav, no Huses, no forts. And it was like, okay. Oh, and Pocos. You buy Pocos. So we did the math, and it ended up being 15 bill to basically go away. So we didn't respond because we didn't feel like that was a offer worth responding to. So pretty much gave us an ultimatum to respond by January 3rd, and we just didn't. And that started everything.
we did do one thing in response, which was we changed our Sav timers away from EUTZ. They did not appreciate that.
But yeah, ultimately, like I've explained before, but ultimately we see the space as a tool. I mean, it doesn't tie us to any identity. So when you have a good tool, like we do, you're not just going to give it away. It's valuable in that regard to have content and or ISK. So ultimately, if you want to bring a good offer, a reasonable offer, not some terrible lowball pennies on the dollar offer, then maybe we could have discussed some stuff. But that was a bit of a slap in the face. And so almost unanimously, when we brought it up on New Year's Eve to the rest of the homies, it was like, nah, we'll fight this out. And
Yeah.
that sparked it.
I think a lot of people, like especially you guys, they probably also saw the potential for good fights to be had. It is a big group knocking on your door, but at the same time, they only can attack you in a specific time zone, which you decide, right? So
yeah, I mean, we're heavily U.S. time zone, even more so the West Coast into AU time zone. We have our token euros, but ultimately that's where the muscle lies. So knowing that, yeah, there's some overlap with Chinese time zone, but knowing that the U.S. time zone guys in Winterco would probably be doing the heavy lifting, we were pretty confident we could extract at least what we thought the space was worth out of kill mails.
So
there were some concerns kind of when we were, just spitballing it early on about what kind of numbers different groups would be able to form to defend. Because Rote Capel individually were not very big, particularly then. We've grown a bit, but a lot of our ability to defend depended on who would be around to help. And it was likewise for anyone in the Euro time zone who was looking to not give up their space. But fortunately, we've been mostly pleasantly surprised with both the kind of people who've shown up, how good they are at PvPing, and how many groups that we didn't even necessarily think about as much at the start who were like, this is great content. We want in.
So who else is involved? Like, what are the other alliances on your side then?
So the main groups are Rote Capel and Brotherhood of Spacers in USTZ, and then the French-speaking alliance Toilet Paper, and the Russian-speaking alliance Quote in the more Euro leaning time zone.
Yeah, and Toilet Paper, like Krontamer, is he still around? Yeah,
Yeah,
kicking.
talk with him a fair bit.
Yeah,
He's a good guy.
he used to be an Init actually, and I think they left Init, like that's ages ago. They left Init when I think when we first took Soft in Fountain, and they were like, nah, and they peaced out. And because we had a similar approach to you guys always, like Soft is a tool, is a commodity, right? Like we use it, we exploit it, and then if it's time to drop it, we drop it. It's like not that big of a deal. It's not our identity. It's like we have maybe Brisk. Brisk's identity is a little bit involved with Fountain, but everyone else is like, we used it and we got our use out of it, and that's it. But yeah, some corps or some FCs or even alliances, they just don't want even to do that step to even like get like soft or even allow hostiles to even have something to attack, which is a big point or a big thing for you guys now, right? So I wonder, like, is Krontamer or like people like him or maybe Toilet Paper, are they maybe now changing their mind, thinking, okay, now we can actually use the soft to get what we want, which is good fights, and maybe taking soft in the first place isn't a problem. I wonder what they are thinking about this whole war, and or if they, if they want to just drop this off anyway and sell it, or is everyone just like on the same page there with you guys?
So
yeah, initially TP got pretty much the same offer So they had a bit more stuff, so it would have been like I think 35 bill. So, but they got the same offer. So their response when we first started talking with them in the kind of the general Veil chat we had, Veil tribute chat, was pretty much the same emotional response we had. And we had minor run-ins with TP just because we're so far out of time zone that normal day to day you don't really run into them except for our campers in MO, their campers up in the D7 pipe, but otherwise like didn't really do much with each other just because not really in the same time zone. But
did they switch their timers also to US time zone? Or did they?
No, I think they're still EU.
All right.
But yeah, ultimately they had the same emotional response, so it's pretty easy to be like kind of look at each other and be like, yeah, let's do this because we're all the same. We're all the same mindset right now.
So that's one thing I wrote down right away. Is like, did they maybe underestimate you guys a little bit coming in? Because it feels like you guys have been doing quite well.
So if you look, I've thought about this, and we talked in the leadership channel, just kind of thinking of like initially, especially when the call came out or not the call, the first offer. I was like, what is the logic here? And what we can surmise is that yeah, they want tribute and veil and whatever rhetoric they're pushing for need to be closer to low sec for mining because CCP changed things, and honestly, this is just the way it is. Sure, but the offer was, like I said, pennies on the dollar as to what we would value it. And then just even if you just summed up everything that was there, I mean, that's a pretty easy summation to make, and it still didn't meet that by any means. So, let alone the emotional tie to it, just the hard assets that are there wasn't even close. So, what we can surmise is that trying to get it with like the easiest amount or least amount of effort possible, it feels like.
Yeah.
And it seems like that is not honestly not gone the way they've expected. I don't know the exact frat war plans other than probably bring all their supers and have more supers than we have subcaps. So whatever. But from what I can tell, it was like try with the least amount of effort for the most amount of gain, and maybe try to ticker tank behind the 15,000 dudes in frat versus our 400 dudes in Rokapel. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know logic in their mind, but from what I could just tell from what they've offered to us, it's that they want to try to get it as easy as possible, and that ultimately completely backfired because we've actually had probably the most amount of people I've ever seen on TeamSpeak ever, either on average or just in fleets. Like dudes are just coming back, let alone other US time zone groups and whatnot wanting to come help. So it's only kind of just kickstarted everything. So it's kind of done us a benefit because we've had some of our, I guess we've had our best month in a year or so just from this whole thing kicking off in the last 4 weeks. So
such a good feeling,
it's
isn't
been good.
it?
Yeah, I mean, homies are just on. Like we were all out playing Cyberpunk or WoW, or I think some dudes were playing Minecraft.
AT fatigue.
Like, yeah, AT fatigue, right? Like that burns people out back in October, or I guess November. But people are just coming back, and it's like almost around the clock. I wake up and there's a whole other page of kill mails from the homies Blop Center roaming all night. I'm just like, geez, OP. Like normally it was pretty solid block within that US time zone, but it's been a massive uptick in activity. So it's actually been a benefit. So I'll say thanks, Frat, for really giving us a reason to log in and fight some nerds.
I always,
particularly for me as an individual, I'll do roaming and some of the more casual stuff. Like I'll like sit around and do a little theory crafting for the AT, but I ended up not participating. But my style of play really orbits around the objective fights, and we just get those in spades with this. Small, medium-sized fights, just like one or two almost every day, and that's what I live for. And I think, especially as those fights, both go well and are a lot of fun and very interesting to do, It's just more and more people see it as something to do. It's also been very nice because a lot of the stuff we would do, 3 or 4 months ago, is we do filament roams or use wormholes, and sometimes to get to the roaming content, it would take a while. And so the fleet stretched out, and it was 2-3 hours before you got back. Now it's undock, go at most 6-7 jumps, kill some people, go home. And it takes an hour, and it's done.
Yep. Oh, that's nice.
And so it's just so easy to get to content. Like, somebody tells me about a timer and like Declan or like Penal, and I'm like, but that's so far away. It's only like 15 jumps, and I'm still saying, oh, that's just so far away. I can't do it because I'm so lazy at this point.
Yeah, I always say the perfect fleet is an hour, but there are no perfect fleets. So usually what I like aim for is 2 hours, right? Like that's a solid fleet. Your guys are not going to be too exhausted. They don't want to fucking struggle them home, Like, oh yeah, guys, we're done after 4 hours of fleet, and now we travel 20 jumps home. Like, oh, what a nightmare. And then you get trapped in a war mode or whatever, right? 2 hours, like that's where I usually try to cut it. So like if you are close to like a content like that, it's just nice, right? And we have like a similar situation. And so what I wanted to say actually earlier was it's interesting, like when your shit is under attack, some like people just rally behind it, right? Like it's a little bit of an identity thing too. It's like it's our stuff, and obviously there's a little bit of an advantage for defenders with Citadels and stuff, even though I said I'm not going to get triggered about Citadels today. But there is a little bit of an advantage there, so you can do stuff even outnumbered. It might not always work out perfectly, right? It's still like hard work, but there is stuff you can do, and people get excited about it, which is super nice to see.
We actually haven't had much in the way of fights on Citadels that are actually gunned yet. The only notable one was us killing the fraternity Fortizar in D7 that they tried to anchor in toilet paper staging.
Yeah, last weekend.
Outside of that, fraternity hasn't really hit any of our structures yet. So most of our fights have been over smaller Sov timers or things like jump bridges that either we've gone and shot or they've tried to shoot ours.
All right. So you didn't even need to take advantage of the defensive like Citadel mechanics, which is good, obviously, right? Aren't Pinecones also in that corner? Like they always did a great job with like Ravens and stuff like this to do it like defensively.
I have some bad news for fraternity then, because the vast majority of the actives in Pinecone are now in Rote Capel. And
they know what I'm talking about. Defensive
they're hungry for blood.
Advantage.
Yeah, I mean we fleeted up with them a bunch for the Raven fleet on defensive timers, and back when we were over in Covrin, and then even here when they were in Pure Blind and we moved into Tribute, and fantastic fights. It's funny the way the meta changes, and you see people start to use Ravens that fought Ravens, and it's like, okay. But I mean, even at first when they were in Syndicate and we were in Covrin, and I was like, are you sure you want to do Ravens? I mean, Ravens haven't been a fleet doctrine for like a decade, but it worked and it made me a believer, and we've had great times doing defensive timers with the big old Raven ball. So it's surprising, but
like rogues
I guess.
Yeah, but like so rogues also would do too. Maybe not as good as a job, but I think it is interesting that suddenly in certain situations you see battleship fleets, battleship blobs, right? So how come, right? Like someone at CCP has to look at this and see like, okay, this is why. And I think that is the advantage of like PDS, right? It's pretty clear in the Raven case, you cannot get bombed, right? So if bombers would warp down and try to bomb you because you're all balled up, like, well, you have your gunner and he's ready, boom, PDS is on, PDS is off. And the bombers are pretty much dead. The bombs first of all, are dead, so you can't really get bombed, which is a big advantage. And then you can have a fax right on there, so you don't need a shit ton of logi. You just focus on those Raven numbers, have 1 or 2 fax ready. Right? It's a big advantage to like have good firepower out of like a smaller fleet. So it's interesting.
Actually, when I think about why you can't bomb people sitting in structures like that with Ravens, the PDS is on the list, but some of the other things that also factor in there is even on a structure without PDS, like an Astra or something smaller, you actually can't bomb them anyway.
Why not?
Because if they've got a hick bubble up, or even just a dictor dropping like surgical probes in the middle of their fleet, you can't actually warp the bombers in a spot where they can bomb. Well, and because you can't reposition because the bombers warp in within tether, so they immediately decloak, all your bombers die regardless.
You know,
and you can't actually bomb run them.
They actually don't decloak that early. They only decloak on landing. And I would say someone crafty could bomb you by just warping in. Like if you have T3s, for example, you warp them in at range and then you warp onto your T3s, but they get decloaked. That's a risk. But if it's Ravens, I would take that risk. Like those Ravens are not going to kill my T3s in time. They're just going to warp off again, right? So there is ways, I would say. There's ways, but you have to be crafty then, 100%. And not everyone is prepared for every little case, right? That's another thing, right? It might just be possible. And I think that's where big groups struggle, actually, to have like that guy sitting there thinking about these kind of scenarios all day. Like, because they just relied on numbers for so long, right? A lot of groups just rely on those numbers. And then when it comes to something they have to get crafted, they don't have the right people right there. They can't make the calls, and then you end up doing whatever you always did. But if it doesn't work, like what then? Like you have to turn around because you can't beat them with numbers, and that's it, right? So that's, I think, the biggest advantage for smaller groups, that they can employ stuff like the Ravens and all that stuff a little easier, or like people are more willing to think outside the box. Is your camera always going out of focus and stuff?
I think I need more light. Just gonna open the window.
Oh yeah,
well, that's really bad
over there.
Oh boy. One sec.
The Americans.
Yeah, day over here in American land.
Yeah. But yeah.
Maybe that'll work better. Anyways. No, that's why. Sorry, my tile floors and super loud. I mean, that's what I enjoy about like Eve in general, right? There's not just one way to win. You can find some niche, something where things synergize and work together, and it's not just people always want to complain it's a pure N1 game or N+1 game, and sometimes fights are. I mean, dread brawls tend to be that way, but even still, on smaller scale stuff, we've been beat up on it before just by. This was back when we were fighting Holpen. I mean, they had active rep dreads, and it was just like, oh, we're not killing them fast enough because we just don't have overwhelming DPS, even though we have technically more dreads. We should be pushing through them. They're blinged out active rep and basically bait tanking us. And it's just things like in those aspects where there is still some skill, maybe not necessarily all in the field and flying your ship, but in the planning and the execution. And that's the kind of stuff that's super interesting when a really well executed trap goes off, or really just well executed play works out. I find that immensely impressive. Like speaking of the boson trick that the goons were going to try, and they ended up losing because the server didn't cooperate. But the amount of planning and whatnot that went into that is absolutely astonishing and fantastic to just that kind of professionalism, right? The practice, the OPSEC, everything that surrounds it.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that impressive, to be honest.
Yeah, I still have good footage of that because I knew that's one of the weird things. Like usually, like I'm always involved with the weird shit in the Alliance or Coalition too. In this case, I wasn't too involved actually, but I knew it was happening. So and I was only in like some assault frig, so I had all the time in the world to just sit there because I lost my Balgon or whatever it was earlier. So I was just sitting there in my frig bay assault frig. And I was just getting the camera ready. I knew where the signals were gonna lit and all that stuff. So I have some really good footage of it. And I was just sitting there hoping it would work. But yeah, sad thing that it didn't work, right? It's a little I would say that's more embarrassing for CCP than the whole M2 like server thing, right? I know the other side, right? The Papi side, they're gonna say like, oh, like, but we all knew the server thing, right? In this case, though, it was really not. I mean, it was also the server to a degree, obviously, but at the same time, they admitted it was the fighters that were actually the problem there, right? Not sure if everyone followed it, but apparently what happened is if you hit fighters with an AoE weapon, because fighters can only get damage once per tick, right? You only do damage one tick with that AoE weapon suddenly, right? So every boson there only did like 1 second damage, which is which is then like it was just plain up, like it's just a bug, right? That wasn't even the server performance necessarily. Who knows what would happen just with the bug removed and just the server performance? I don't know. I wouldn't gamble 150 supers for it though. I wouldn't be confident that it didn't work. Like Papi guys did, right? A lot of I forgot who it was. I think PGL and you guys all talked about and said like, yeah, it wouldn't have worked anyway. I'm not so sure about that. Like, I wouldn't put 150 supers in one spot and try it, right? So
I mean, you just don't know because it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But again, weird edge case, right? Doc passcode, spaghetti code. I mean, how's that to be foreseen unless you specifically, I guess, test for that? But I mean, again, so many factors that go into play, and that's just one of them that just gets overlooked because, well, why wouldn't it work?
Yeah.
A lot of it, thank God I don't have to deal with tie-dye, so I don't need to think about it. But
no tie-dye.
A lot of it is kind of the debate of how much you can actually mitigate for versus what you can't, right? And so in the case of M2, like the second timer, like you can kind of guess about where the server is going to die, and like maybe Pappy got unlucky with like the server not doing what it usually does and just deciding it's time to die and instead kicking people out. But I don't have too much sympathy for them because I feel like there were a lot of things they could have done before they'd gotten to that point where it would not have been as kind of dire a situation as what they ended up in.
You say the server doing what it normally does, but like every time that same situation would play out, the server would do that exact same thing. Like, it's not surprising. Like, that was our whole point, is that everyone knew that if they took the course of action that they took, their server would do this. Like, that was why everyone...
Yeah, but let's say there's a high chance, right? And I think they got a little bit, like, if it was 100%, I think they wouldn't have done it, of course, right? But there was always that chance that they're just going to get away with it. There was, and I think that little chance made them do it, right? And then they're like, it's going to be fine, right? If you have that feeling.
But if you talk about, like, what the server normally does versus, like, with that, the server normally shits itself when you jump in a bunch of stuff at the same time onto an already 10% tie-dye field.
Yes, but what that means, at least in some of the cases in the past, right, is people jump in and they like can't load or it takes forever, but eventually everything loads. Or like in UALX, the server says my time has come when goons jump in their Titans and just dies. And so, like, and you can hear this from Billy. His expectation was that it would either A, take them 2 hours to load, they'd feed 50 Titans, and eventually they'd fight, or the server would say, my time has come, and then they'd all be reloading at the same time. Was that a good guess? I don't think.
Well, in hindsight.
And I think my primary fault with what they were doing was they didn't have any sort of mitigation for the mid-time, right? They didn't bring in any SS carriers that their fortes are. They didn't bring in much in the way of subcaps beforehand. They didn't have all these like little things lined up to kind of deal with eventualities, and they just kind of YOLO'd it.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty clear. They just didn't take enough time for themselves to position and all that stuff. And you could tell that was the major issue that led to like all these other little things, right? That they didn't have shit ready here for. Like, and they jump in an hour before the timer, and then to load. But it was 6,500 people in the system, right? So they just rushed it, and that's how you make mistakes, right? On a big scale and a large scale. It's just how it is. It just ended up a little bit more expensive.
Eve not working, all my clients just disconnected. Feels good.
Well, so like how did Fraternity then, so first of all, did they only move the Euro time zone they have up there, and like they're only looking to fight you guys in Euro time zone? Because that's how, as far as I can tell, right? Or did they move everything up there? I don't even know exactly how much they moved up there.
They haven't actually moved anything of meaningful value to Vale yet. Most of their fighting has been, they'll have kind of what I would just call Vale fraternity, which is the people who tend to live in Vale. We'll do a fleet out of there. Maybe some people will jump clone from somewhere else in a subcap. And then sometimes they'll have the US or EU TZ Winter Coalition guys either roll into their fleet if it's a big timer, or maybe they'll do their own separate fleet. And that'll get them anywhere between 50 to 150 subcaps, depending on how important the timer is. But 50 to 150 subcaps in either US or EU is something we can deal with. So they haven't been able to make much progress with that. Their initial steps where they tried to headshot stagings, they went after JGAMP for us, and they went after D7 for toilet paper. And once those failed, that after that they kind of took a step back and haven't been doing a whole lot offensively. My guess is they're just waiting till, like Hell said, they have as many super capitals as we have subcap pilots, and then they're trying to do something bigger. But with however many of their Titans stuck down in M2 and what I would assume would be terrible optics of moving their entire super cap fleet to Vale while their allies are busy fighting a super war on the other side of the map.
Hey, I'm going to talk to Mittens and get you paid for it. If you drag all the supers and titans from Fraternity up there.
Why we didn't plan that. I mean, like I said, you look at it, recordings we've heard. After those first two initial pushes, you start hearing more excuses, right? There's the 600 Odin's call meme came out of that one. But
what?
So like I said, it seems like they. Oh yeah. 600 Odin's call were in tribute, ready to fight, and so that's why they stood down for one of the fleets. Anyways, point being, that kind of goes back to the logic of trying to get tribute for the least amount of effort or cost, and then seeing that not work out, thinking either we're just going to roll over because arguably our numbers are kind of low November, December because Dad Capel and AT burnout, right? So you're not really around, but on paper, it looks like it should be relatively easy. Just bunch of nano boys who don't know what they're doing. But I would not be reticent to say that we've been underestimated, and that's not to say that like, yeah, we're gonna go completely win this thing, right? Because when those supers get up here, and it's just gonna be completely outnumbered. So that'll be an interesting fight. We'll see what blood we can take. But again, I mean, numbers is a viable strategy, right? Sometimes it's your only strategy, and that's fine. Not gonna deride anybody for that. That is a normal thing. But kind of just got to see how see the cards for what they are and play it from there, right? So yeah, we're not going to win a stand-up fight with more supers than we have subcaps. That's not how the game works. But we can do other stuff.
I guess looking to go a little bit more on the offensive, like push a little bit further and see what you can do and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that kind of response ends up. It's easier to be on the offensive than it is on the defensive, right? Not so much on the field. We're not going to talk about Citadels, but ultimately, you can start to control the tempo when you're on the offensive, and you can actually cause that harassment and/or chaos, if you will, to force them to respond, because you get the opportunity to attack when you want to attack, and they have to respond on that next timer.
I mean, now is the time because they don't have the Supers, Titans, and all that stuff, right? And like whatever they can form in certain areas, it always depends on where you fight. Fraternity, right? Don't take a fight in Oasa, I'd say, right? They're gonna have so much shit there. But in your area there, like, I think it's pretty manageable. And if you tackle, let's say, if you have the same reaction over and over again from them, and it's like a manageable amount of supers, I bet you would find some volunteers, like some other groups, like medium-sized groups, let's say Volta or I don't know, Volta, Dreadbomb, dock workers, right? There's a lot of medium-sized groups at the moment that are very active and very capable. So, you know, those supers, they're not going to be like, they can't just throw them around, right? They have to move a shit ton, so they're safe, right? Because supers are only safe in a big group. If you feel 10 supers over and over again, that's 10 dead supers. Like, even in incursion systems, we were hunting Fraternity actually not too long ago, and caught a couple together with Darkside. 10 supers, manageable, right? But yeah. Can't wait to see how far you can push in there. And maybe you can drag all the supers up there. Who knows?
Yeah.
I've been saying for a long time, particularly in discussions I've had elsewhere with people regarding balance, is there's a lot of people who just dismiss the capability of mid-sized groups, particularly in a defensive situation, where, like, yes, if you left us in the open field versus a group with some more dreads and a lot more subcap numbers, they'd beat us. But when we're fighting defensively in our prime, and it's on timers I know about, where it's, this is the armor timer of our Fortizar, I can ping people to come help out and get some content. It can be very difficult to clear out an entrenched group like that knows what it's doing. And I've said for a long time that, yes, if, NC Dot or Fraternity or Legacy or Goons, whoever wanted to clear out Tribute and Veil, they could. But if they refuse to bring supers, it's not going to work.
Oh, it's going to work for a while, but it gets bloody too, right? Like toilet paper and like all these smaller groups. Like, even if they would bring like 10 times the numbers, it would be a struggle to always make sure like you get your fleet there in one piece, you get it out in one piece and all that stuff, right? So at the moment they don't even have the numbers to do that, but even then they could maybe take it initially, but holding that, it doesn't look too juicy for them, right? Like, you're gonna hold that while these guys, like all those small scale fanatics are gonna be in your space. That's a whole nother thing, right?
When you start talking things like set piece fights, right? So like M2 Keepstar, right? That has to draw everybody to one location. So you start losing things like the ability to maneuver, to work autonomously. But I know people hate the soft system, but I've had the most entertaining fights doing a Sov and Ptosis battle because
it happens, yeah.
Because I mean, the aggressor, I guess we were the aggressor in this one, but the opposing fleet was moving as a group. and had to stay as a group. So we were able to spread out, work as smaller groups, and take care of the Ptosisers and keep pushing them off the timers. And then on the flip side, also pick apart the guys who were straggling, either make plays with bubbles or bushes, and able to start picking apart their fleet piece by piece, and eventually drove them out of the pocket and won the timers. So that's some of my more entertaining fights have been kind of that dynamic Ptosis fight. Granted, there's probably a limit to where you just get so many dudes, but your command and control structure has to be able to support that. And I'm not fully read in on the fraternity command and control structure because I don't speak Chinese, but I would reckon to say that it is not nearly as broad as the Freemen of the North is, because ultimately we have multiple groups, but even within those groups, I know multiple FCs are capable of fully running autonomously. Not to say that Frat doesn't have FCs, right? They could just all be down there in Delve doing that action. But from what we've seen, they're very, how do you put it, align, warp as a group, everybody push F1.
Mutants.
Yeah, mutants. But I mean, just not very dynamic.
Yeah.
And so unless you bring overwhelming numbers where you can literally cover everything with a fleet that's the size of our fleet, it becomes a different kind of fight, and one that you can actually make plays and do more interesting stuff and work to your advantage, being able to be maneuverable.
Yeah, since you talked about like the soft stuff, like I always said, the idea is good, right? Like how the soft, we call it fuzzy soft, Aegisov is the correct name, I believe. Like I think the idea is really good, and sometimes it works out just like that, like you just described, right? A lot of times it just doesn't, but I would say like I wish we had the soft system, but with a couple less nodes. I think it's too many nodes. It's just too, I don't know. I don't want to say it's too spread out. But nobody as an FC has an easy time just seeing where all the nodes are. First of all, right? That like that organization behind it. People are getting better and better with it, but it takes so much already away from your like focus as an FC that you're just winging it at some point, right? You're just zooming around looking for stuff on those nodes and like trying to snag some Ptosis. But like what I always miss in this whole thing is like a clear battlefield where you can say, okay, they're right here, we're right there, and this is where we can fight. But most of the time, nobody has time to fight because everyone's just hunting toasters and avoiding the fight, really. Sometimes it feels like. So I wish there was less nodes. But
that's interesting, because to me, the fact that it's spread out and the fact that there are as many nodes as they are what gives us our biggest advantage as a group, where we know we have a lot of people we can rely on to do their own thing. Because I'm not a great FC. I don't want to think about very many things at once. And so the ability of 5 to 10 of our guys to just get in really good nano ships or in like some other kind of small group doctrine, and I just know they're off killing toasters. I don't need to think about it. I know that any node in the constellation, they know where it is. They've coordinated with themselves to make sure that the enemy isn't toasting any nodes, that they don't actively have a fleet sitting on defending. And so then all my focus is I'm just going to kill the enemy fleet or box them in somewhere or whatever it needs to be, right? And I can just focus on that.
Yeah,
and
so I think
that autonomy with some of our other players makes us able to leverage a lot more numbers, or leverage ourselves against much bigger numbers than we can in, say, a static fight in a single location where there's not as much that people can do.
So and that's why I said like I like the idea of what it is supposed to be like, and for you guys it works out like that, right? When I said like less nodes, I'm not saying it should be just like 2 nodes and that's it, right? Like 2 half-an-hour nodes and that's the soft timer. That's not what I'm asking, right? I'm just thinking when those nodes don't get it's like on a second cycle, right? Like at first I think it's 4 nodes that spawn at the beginning, and then you have after 15 minutes the next wave spawns, I believe. Or is it 10 minutes? I don't even know. But you have the next wave spawn, and then it just gets too much at some point, right? So if you're not on top of it right away, I believe it just is a little bit much. And I would rather have nodes that stay longer, but then like just have like 4, maybe 5 nodes total, and that's the maximum, but have them stay longer so people can maybe make some plays and think about what they want to do. Like, because a lot of times you don't even have the time to make a plan for it. That node that's next door, you already have to rush to it. And it can be an advantage, right? I'm not saying it's always bad. Sometimes it's really good if hostiles want to rush to a node and you're ready for it, right? That's like the opportunity you're looking for. But I always feel like it's just all a little bit rushed, and then you end up just sending shit around aimlessly. And maybe I'm just too much of a planner to enjoy that part. But I don't know. I do wonder how you guys would do if there was like a little less nodes, like I just described, right? Or like less amount of nodes, but the nodes you've got, like let's say 4 or 5 max, they stay a little longer. What do you guys think? Would that be a big change for the stuff you enjoy about it, or would it be like pretty much the same still?
I mean, not necessarily. The fight I was talking was last year, back when Reverb was trying to take the IFJ pocket. What Murray's referencing, this one was a more recent one on our own stuff, where he had the main stand-up fleet taking the main fight, and we had, I think, 6 to 8 homies rolling around, coordinating in the text channel and working the nodes as well. So once you get to that scale where you actually have that fleet to contest, I mean that's another kind of layer to the whole Ptosis fight. But even still, I feel like you still have the opportunity against a opponent that's not prepared to. And it all depends on, like, I guess, the geography of this constellation. A pipe's going to be way worse to be running around in than a
There's
cluster.
Some weird constellations out there.
Yeah, where things are connected, right? So, but given that chance, you do have the ability to continue to run around and ward off the toasters. I mean, you still need enough guys in the right ships to be able to make plays, but I think there's a pretty broad spectrum in there that it allows it to play out. I would say the blitz method. I mean, yeah, you only have like 10 to 15 minutes as a aggressor to get work done before, if they go uncontested, they'll just get them all back in a high enough ADM system. But I don't think you're wrong, right? Necessarily that you could do less nodes, but as it stands right now, we've been pretty well prepared for any of the defensive fights we've had to take. Personally, I'd like to see more harassment opportunities. I think the ESS change is actually fantastic, personally. The ability to go in there and stir the pot or kick the hornet's nest, if you will, is hilarious. I think that's actually fantastic. We kind of missed the old moon binding stealing, or those siphons. That's what I'm looking for.
Siphons?
Those were also funny. Easy to game, right? Easy to spot. So I wish there was some other mechanic, right, to mess with moon mining, other than obviously harassing the miners when they're out. But really, just any of those money-making opportunities, there should be a way to harass. I would enjoy more ways to harass, because ultimately that's one way for a smaller group to be impactful versus just a bigger stand-up fight. So it's gotten better, right, with the ESS change, but I think there's still room to expand there and do more work.
I do. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just do wish they wouldn't have done a 3-hour to 2-hour change. Right? I felt like that wasn't necessary. But yeah, I think the ESS one, maybe the second best change this year or last year. I think the filaments are the number one, definitely. And then the and then the ESS just for content all around, like daily content. That's something we never had in EVE, really, when you think about it, right? Like just undocking, filamenting, having some fun, like we talked about it earlier, right? Just so important. And it came as a surprise for everyone too. I felt like when it first got introduced, everyone was like, "Wait, what? You can do this?" Like, fuck yeah! I was like, that was probably the best change, I think. But yeah, the ESS also on point. I know they've been thinking about it for a long time, and I think they got the ESS right, or pretty much right at the beginning. The 6.5 minutes makes total sense, I think. Right now you have 6.5 minutes where you have to sit there and steal it. I think that's a good timer. Yeah, the 3 and the 2 hour thing. Yeah, but yeah.
I just enjoy that it forces people to be active and aware, right? So they have to be available to respond, not just dock up. There's nothing you can do because I'm just going to come back out when you leave. So
yeah.
Which is, I mean, there's not a lot of play there. I can't do anything to affect you. I can't force a change. It's not really a multiplayer game at this point because I can't. None of the moves I make affect you, right? Just it doesn't make any sense in a multiplayer game to not be able to make somebody make a decision. They don't have to do it, but that decision that they've made to not do anything now has a price tag attached to it.
What I wanted to add actually was like when you talk about harassment as smaller groups, I do know both sides of the whole thing, right? Like I'm part of a bigger group, obviously, and then giving small groups too easy of a way to harass you, that's also not good, right? I mean, at least with the ESS, yes, you can steal cash, and it's kind of annoying, but at the same time, you're committed once you're in there, right? So there is a way for us to react if we're in a bigger group. Now, when it comes to soft stuff, and it's not that bad at the moment, I feel like, but in general, you can get soft trolls all the time and all that. Like, I'm not a big fan of that stuff, to be honest. Like, I'm not sure if I'm a fan of Ptosis links being able to even spool down, right? But if you give people too easy of a way to arrest, that's also not good, right? So I hope they, if they introduce more of this kind of stuff, they strike the balance as well as they did with the ESS, and then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of a Ptosis link as a game mechanic. I think it's a bit contrived, honestly. Like, it just doesn't make much sense. I personally enjoyed the previous setup where you could just like shut off station services, right? With shooting the station. Like, I thought I still think that's a good mechanic in terms of being able to now remove something that needs to be quote unquote repaired, versus just I am shooting this salve wand at a structure and then some other rando structures, and it somehow that kills the structure and all the upgrades you put into it. Like, why can't I just focus on one thing? Like, I don't know, your pyre detection array, or your jump bridge array, right? Like, I can shoot the jump bridge, sure, but I mean, I don't like the mechanic per se, just because it's a bit contrived. I don't mind the mechanic to have to run around and do multiple objectives, but it still is a bit contrived. So I don't know of a good middle ground there. Just speaking from emotion, honestly, but I don't kind of like the initial setup. I think there should be a bit broader of a spectrum there than all or nothing in terms of winning this fight.
Yeah.
But just speaking from emotion, I haven't put too much thought into that, honestly.
I think my two biggest things outside of the scale issue, which I agree with what you said kind of before, Pando, with Sav, I think a lot of the things that make Sav fun at the 50 versus 50 to like even up to maybe like 150 versus 150 scale completely break down at the scale of Sav fights in Delve. Because it's not, small guys doing the side show objective. It's like 100-man jackdaw fleets.
Yeah.
And in Ptosis facts, which I don't know, maybe it's fun, but everyone I speak from large blocks says they hate Sov, so I assume it's not very fun.
Well, at the same time, we have a saying in it. There's only one thing that's worse than Sov, like than Fuzzy Sov. It's people complaining about Fuzzy Sov. And I think that's always true, right? Like, you can enjoy it, but people, like, a lot of times I've seen it. There's a good fight to be had, and everyone's having a blast technically, but people still hate it so much they want to hate it, and then they don't enjoy themselves, even if they just had a good fight. You know, they want to complain about Fuzzy Sov. I think lately, actually, thinking back, it got way better, right? But it was like a really, like, people just like to hate on certain things, and then they get trapped and they can't get out of it. Sometimes I feel like they're stuck with, oh, this sucks, and then they join the fleet to do what they think sucks, and then everything sucks, you know, and then nobody is enjoying themselves. So, like, I think that might be a good, you know, it might be a how do you say it? Maybe it might be a good tool if you can have your guys enjoy Fuzzy Sov. That's what I always said, actually, to like Shines and Bliss and the other guys, the other FCs in the alliance. Imagine how strong of an alliance we would be if everyone would fucking have a blast doing Fuzzy Sov stuff, right? Imagine everyone like would love this shit. Like, we would be the most feared alliance in the game, right? Because like nobody wants to do it, but we love it. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, go harass ourselves? Like, bring it on. So yeah, if you guys having a blast, that's scary. That's scary shit.
Don't get me wrong, there are definitely some smaller things that I think, if changed, like, definitely move the fight to a better place. I don't think ECM should work on Ptosis module spool at all. If you want to get rid of the toaster, you can come kill it. And the way, and this is very in depth, so I won't dig into it too much. But the way ADMs impact Sov timers is actually multiplicative. So if you look at like an ADM of 1 versus an ADM of 2 versus an ADM of 5, the ADM, the window in which you can hit that timer and how painful it is with the offensive versus defensive changes more from ADM 1 to 2, which is just the strategic index of like existing in the system for a while, versus the ADM of 5 is much more painful because it reduces the window by 9 hours between 1 and 2. But the difference between 4 and 5 is like an hour and 33 minutes cut away from the window. And if they made it so that lower ADM systems of like 2, 3, and 4 were actually hittable, versus like an ADM of 3 in a system that's set to your opposite time zone is completely unassailable, which is just like one guy ratting with a Vexer every couple days. And so,
yeah, wait a second. I have to actually ask, like, if I understood this right. So you're saying, if you have an ADM of at least 3, that's already like it's too hard to even be attacked, or like
if it's cross time zone, the window becomes very difficult because the way the ADM works on the multiplier is it divides it, right?
Yeah.
And so lower ADM increases are much more impactful than an ADM going from 5 to 6, right?
While an ADM from 5 to 6 is way harder to hold.
Well, a system with ADM 5 versus a system with ADM 6 is functionally the same for a defender. The timers are really long, the window's pretty small, but the difference between 5 and 6 is the difference between a system being a capital versus a system just being like actively ratted with a little bit of mining.
Yeah.
And so like, to me, that should be a big difference, right? Like, oh, like your capital and like your systems that you rat and mine in all the time should be your ADM 5 to 6s. Those should be really hard to hit. If you just have some guy who like Gila rats every now and then, and it's ADM 3 or 4, it should be a little more hittable than it is now.
But I don't really disagree that you're going to get an ADM 3 or 4 from a dude in his Vexer ratting every once in a while. Like you're kind of downplaying how hard it is to get something to an ADM 3 or 4. As someone who had to push ADMs in Cloud Ring by myself for Panda,
hey, I helped.
It's a lot harder to keep an ADM up to 3 or 4 than just sitting in a VNI for a couple hours in a belt every other day.
It was actually the military index that we were pushing, but it's the same.
Same concept.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're not going to get too much sympathy from me because I've managed to keep up a couple of systems by myself with the power of Murray Rothbardo's Ishtars.
Well,
you see Hells is kind of smiling in the background.
I
get accused of crabbing too much, but
so there you
go.
So you crab too much to keep them up, right? But how many are you crabbing with, and for how long? Because that's my point. Because it's not just like a dude in
one Ishtar for 2 or 3 hours in a system while you're watching Netflix will keep it at 3 or 4.
The thing is, I also have to add that Miranda had to red in systems that are pretty shit. So the security status were like, because I can't just put wormhole generators in our renting space, right? What are the renters gonna say? I mean, I did think about it, but at the same time, it would have been a little bit of a dick move.
You don't have to.
We had to do it in shit space. Sorry,
you're not the one that would have to deal with the renters afterwards.
I used to, but then luckily you took that job on. So
not at that point of time, though. That was when I was dealing with the renters and dealing with fucking ratting and Cloud Ring with the shitty systems.
Are you then saying I should have done it? I should have done it, huh?
To be fair, Cloud Ring is pretty terrible from everything I've been told, just as a place. So understandable.
Yeah, well, so that's another thing. I was like, I don't get it. Like those wormhole generators, most people don't even know they exist, right? Quantum flux generators. You can put them in your iHub and you have a higher chance of wormholes spawning. Yep. Nobody does it. I think PL did.
We have a few installed.
You have?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's rare though.
Well, so before filaments, right? Obviously we roamed a bunch. So I mean, you're talking 30 jumps to get anywhere when we were over in Qyrdun, just because for whatever reason we picked that spot. But like, there's nothing around, right? I think Init was over in Cloud Ring and Syndicate at the time. That's like we were helping out Cone a bit every now and then, but day to day, trucking across the map to go to Geminate and mess with B-Horde. So you're talking 30 jumps round trip. So we got pretty good at finding wormholes. Thera, some of our dudes got really good at using drifter holes, and then they have a whole thing set up. So between that and then you throw in filaments, we had the ways to get around. So when we took tribute, it was before filaments, and it was like, yeah, wormhole generator, because we got used to using that, low sec highway as the wormholers call it.
On that scale,
and you could find it, put the bookmarks in Corp and ping the homies. Hey, we got this route, and helps you get around. So yeah, we threw them in because we find it funny. Or our former wormholers are prolific at scanning, and so they'd find a rando wormholing crab operation going on, and of course we'd go and try to dunk on it. But yeah, I think they're fantastic. They definitely give you more avenues to go find stuff.
I do like them, don't get me wrong. Like, that's why I started the Cloud Ring project, and we put them into like one constellation there. And I was like, hey guys, you guys want like content, like go red up these systems a little bit, because that's the annoying part about them, is that they are linked to the military index, right? So they are most effective in systems where it's mostly redded, like it's like. But people that read a lot, they don't want wormholes, right? So you can't put them into the systems where those like ultra care bears are, because they're gonna fucking cry about it. So you have to find kind of the middle ground or whatever. But then you'll never get the military index 6 kind of system. So it's a tricky kind of thing. But I think right now wormhole space is fairly quiet. It's just like a highway used anyway. I don't know of any wormhole groups where people would be like, oh shit, what are we gonna do if they show up? They're pretty small and manageable, I'd say. So at the moment, I would put them in anywhere, I guess. But yeah, we have a similar thing. Ex-wormholers, right? We've got TD Sin that put them into a constellation in Fountain too, right? Put them all in there. And so they can still feel like wormholers, I guess.
No, yeah, no.
It's great.
I think wormholes are perfect for day tripping into or you're using for transit. And the wormholer mafia will probably hate me, but living in wormholes, I don't know. I mean, I know CCP's original concept wasn't for that to be a thing. I think it's cool that people made it work, right? Kind of just like off their own effort. And I understand it's a lot of effort, but ultimately, personally, how I like to use them is day tripping or as a transit method, just because it does, other than filaments, allows you to kind of just pop up out of nowhere if they're not watching. Drifter wormholes too, because I feel like people forget about them a lot and don't usually mess with them because probably going to get rolled by the drifters, right? So I enjoy that element of surprise, and then the filaments even more so because you're just instantaneously in somebody's backyard, or you roll a dice poorly and you're sometimes in Delve. So, like, cool, we're gonna just wait it out 15 minutes, homies, and try this again. But I do enjoy the randomness and that kind of aspect. But yeah, I mean, we have them there because don't have renters, so nobody will really get mad if a rando wormhole group pops in because we'll probably go fight them.
Yeah, probably welcome content. And so drifter wormholes, they have been around for a long time, and I think for the first, I don't know, half a year, nobody used them at all. And then I think there was a couple guys in test that did it for a while, and then they stopped doing it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I had access to the small SIG they had that was doing them for a little while because I'd started using drifter wormholes, and so they were like, hey, like, we're the people that do this. And they kind of had shit sorted out with them.
Yeah.
And I think Seto would use them on occasion.
Yeah.
For like the bomber fleets.
Yeah, exactly. Like same as us, right? Like we then started using them like a lot, and I think that's where also Seto started using them because he was using what's it called? Goku's a lot. And we were flying Stukas at the time, so it's basically the same thing, right? So he like it's just parallel, basically, right? He did Goku's through Drifter ones, and we did the Stukas. Which still to this day, right? Seto can fight me on this, but we came up with it. Like, just because you had AB bombers, you can't just claim every doctrine that has AB bombers in it, right? But it's okay. But yeah, drifter warm-ups are like really good. I think any smaller group, or like let's say medium-sized group, if you have 2 or 3 dedicated guys, that's a lot of content you can get out of these. A lot of it. It's not that hard to map if you're prepared, you know how it works, and I'm more than willing to share that actually. If anyone has questions, you can map alone. Even in 45 minutes, you can map a drifter wormhole with 60 connections, potential connections, right? 6 of them are always wormholes. They're pretty useless. Then you have a couple high sec, a couple low sec. But usually we map up to like I would say 30 non-EOL, non-crits, null-sec connections, which is there's a solid amount of potential right there, I'd say.
Yeah, I've done it myself a few times. It's not fun, but you can almost always get at least 2 or 3 wormholes to somewhere decent.
Yeah. I'd be like, whenever I map a wormhole or like someone maps it and I see it, I can always find something somewhere. There's enough stuff. I mean, it depends on what kind of fleet, right? It's not always easy to find something for like 200 people that they all go come home happy. It's just like it's a little bit more challenging right now. Sorry, say that again, Brenna.
The hardest thing is finding an entrance.
Yeah, I think that depends a lot on where you are, though, right? For example, Fountain, we always had a lot of entrances, and I think there's just a more dense. It's more dense with the Jove observatories than in other regions. Like, I never thought about that because that's where we started doing this. But now looking at Dell, for example, there's not that many. And then it's a war zone at the moment. A lot of people roll these and stuff. So it's even more rare in Delph, I guess. But yeah, other regions like Curse doesn't have a lot of them. So Fountain seems to be really good for it. Just a coincidence we started there. Yeah. And thanks, Grace, for the birthday wishes. A little late, but not too late. It's okay. I love you still, Grace. Oh, you know what we should be talking about? Actually, we're pushing it a little bit long. Since you guys have to run, I guess. Let me know if you have to run.
We can stick around for a bit more.
But when we were like before we started, you guys talked about like military stuff, right? Because you're actually a pilot in the Air Force. Miranda's obviously, like most people probably know by now, an officer in the Army. And you guys were talking about something. And what I always find fascinating is like how many military people are in this game and why, right? Why do they stick to Eve a lot of times? And I think I've got a theory. I'm not a military guy, but I've got a theory that like just the structure of like groups in the game, they tend to organize themselves in a military way. And I don't know, like the leadership aspect of FCing and stuff like this, it's like you can, like, it goes both ways, right? Like someone who is in a leadership position in the military probably has an easier time picking a leadership position in a game. But then I would say it would probably also work the other way around. So I wonder what's your point of view on that thing?
I'd say so it's not so much like the leadership aspect, I would say, right? Because in my job, my day job, not the flying part, pretty much end up just handling a lot of fires that come my way, right? Hey, Major Hells, we got this problem. Like, okay, how do we fix that? And then ultimately, it ends up doing a lot of mentoring of like, well, what have you done to solve this problem before you brought it to me? But personally, I enjoy a lot of the kind of just open-endedness of the game, right? And that the problem solving that comes with it, because not everything is super clear cut. There's always a lot of risk when you're talking PvP. PvE in general technically has risk, just because homies can come out of nowhere. But the PvP in general, you're always trying to buy down risk, figure out what the enemy's doing, and then actually let that play out. So I would say not so much the leadership aspect, but just the no joke, like, I'm not, like, it's not a strategy game per se, because every human behind those ships is a real human. It's not just like Command and Conquer, right, where I tell the infantrymen to go this way, they're going to go that way.
God damn it, I miss Command and Conquer.
Right, whether they die or not, right, they're going to go that way. Whereas here, I guess theoretically there's probably a leadership part, but I'm convincing 200 other nerds to go do something. Or ultimately, as a opponent, I'm convincing 200 nerds to not do something, whether that's through breaking morale. As people always talk about, wars in Eve are won off of morale because demigod capsuleers just respawn, right? You can't kill all the enemies, they just come back. Or, through a ruse or through show of force. And so you get all those different aspects that do play into real life military strategic things. I don't want to make too many parallels because I usually find that cringy, but I find that sort of openness and the fact that I'm not playing one person, but I'm playing hundreds, dozens, depending on whatever the size is, right? And every single one of them has that role to play, and whether they do it well or don't do it well can determine whether or not you're going to win and succeed. And then there's also just the gambling of it, right? Like, I'm going to go to the CSS with my 12 dudes, and they're going to respond with 20, and we're going to see what happens. And hopefully we have a better game plan than they do. I feel like it's kind of the same reason people like to play sports, right? Like, yeah, sports are usually a little bit more fair just because there's rules about how many people you can have on the field, but a lot of it comes down to strategy and not so much that tactical decision, if you will, on the individual plays, but like the grander, what are we showing, what are we messaging, and then we sneak something else in, right? Big analogy being football, right? So you can watch it in the games as they go on. You can see where the things start to break down, whether they figure out a strategy or a pathway to success or not, and then you can watch how that plays out. I think it's very same true in Eve. Like, you could see what they're messaging and see what they're putting out and work around that. So I mean, the meta game, quote unquote, if you will, of, oh hey, like they're fitting their ships like this, like, well, we'll just tank their damage specifically. And then the counterpoint being they realize that and throw another curveball at you. And it's always interesting to try to fight through all that risk, right? All the unknowns, and then still come out ahead, even if or not, right? And then try to break that apart. So, guess kind of leadership bit, but I think it's more for me personally the problem solving, finding what that problem set is, and it's always really dynamic because it's people versus systems or machines. So there's always a element of randomness that comes with dealing with a large group of people.
Yeah.
I think I rambled, but
but so what do you think draws military people in the first place? Is it that, like, dealing with people, or is it like the organization of most groups? Is it the war?
I'd say probably it takes a specific kind of person to stick with the military as well as stick with Eve. I think there's probably a pretty good overlap in the Venn diagram of that, because there's a lot of people that serve, but a lot of people only do one tour, which, nothing against them, but I mean, just 4 years and that's not for them. But the people who do stay in a long time, I think there is that overlap of that structure, maybe the hurry up and wait if we want to joke, but also just the structure as well as I guess the problem solving end, or just the competitive nature of it. Because at home, I mean, you just do a lot of training. You don't actually really get to do a lot of your real job, right? If that's what you want to talk about, but that's kind of a good thing because then you'd be fighting wars and that sucks. But in Eve, I get to fight a quote unquote real world war with quote unquote real consequences, right? Like, ships go away, this goes away. Like, there is a kind of that risk in there of that, which I think probably speaks to a lot of people in that it's not, you're able to actually do kind of what you're training for. I don't know if that makes sense. Versus in real life, I don't really want to do what I'm training for. I mean, I do, but not to the extent of an actual like war. Yeah, that would not be cool.
I guess that makes sense. Miranda can't even talk. She can't unmute herself because Big Doggo.
My dog is going absolutely insane right now.
My dog's so mad.
It's really interesting to me that a lot of military people do kind of end up congregating in Eve, because I feel like the reasons I play it are very diametrically opposed to kind of that desire for structure. As Hells can attest to, my respect for authority within Eve command structures is mediocre at best. I have a tendency to want to do my own thing, and a lot of the reason I play Eve is because Eve is so complex and there's so many variables that go into fights that you don't see in other games, right? And like what Hells said with sports. So yeah, sports, you've got the same number of people on each side, in Eve, not only do you not have the same number of people on each side, but because it's Eve, you can do the equivalent of bringing, a tank to a knife fight. And you can't do that in other games. You can't bring kind of a turbo champion into League of Legends or any of that kind of comparison.
It's a good and a bad thing, though, right?
It's because of that complexity that I can very consistently find niches for myself where I can say, I'm doing something that nobody else is doing, and I'm kind of doing it my own way. And finding those niches is what really drives me, not just to do what I do if I'm just flying solo, but in fleets, I will regularly, try and run fleets or try and propose fleet compositions that are, by many standards, unacceptable. But sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And if they work, I get to say that nobody else did it first.
I know exactly what you mean. Like, if you do something first, that's the shit I love the most, I think. Like, coming up with something weird and then trying it out.
So all I'm saying is, after they changed hacks, I was the first person to get MWD HML sacrileges off the ground.
Might be the only still. But I think a lot of part why you stick around, I think, it ends up being a lot of the camaraderie, right? So you build that through the battlefield, right? I'll butcher the quote, so I won't use it, but I mean, there's a quote talking about friendly competition, right? So you build that on the battlefield, if you will, and whether that's a sports or Eve grid. I mean, half the time I'm on the computer, I'm just shooting the shit on TeamSpeak. Yes, wife. Bye. But anyways, half the time I'm on TeamSpeak, I'm just shooting the shit. Not even flying around space, right? Just dudes are on there. It's like, what's up, nerds? How's it going?
I think that's a lot of times.
Yeah, I think the camaraderie, right, is actually what builds and keeps people around, and so that might be a factor as well. And ultimately, I think that's what ends up making or breaking organizations in the game. Just like we talked about, morale wins wars. Like, you'll see dudes who've been playing the game together since early 2000s, and they're still playing. They might be on Reddit the whole time saying, I hate this game, whatever, but they still log in and hang out with homies, right? Because A, there's nothing else like it, but also B, like, the friends are there. Their friends are real, right? Like, get together, hang out, drink beer. Like, that's something I don't know if you would see in other games if it's not quite built the same way.
Yeah, not to this extent, right? Like you said, like, those battles and the losses are real, so it ends up like it's a stronger kind of connection there than if you would, like, let's say World of Warcraft and you do some whatever, what's it called again? I forgot. The fucking
thing. You grind for gear and it's just the losses aren't as palpable.
Yeah, like if you die in work, like, who gives a shit? Nobody remembers the raid from like 2 years ago, where something dropped. Maybe they remember that drop, but they don't remember the story behind it because there's no story. There's like it's a hollow kind of construct designed by someone else. But in this case, for example, there's a war that's going on with you guys, right? In a year or two, you guys, like, all your dudes will still remember that. They will still talk about it. And remember that fight where Mori brought out the weirdo sacrileges and we completely got dumpstered. Yeah, that was a good time.
I mean, we still talk about days in Aquarius, days in Great Wildlands, days in Kavrin, right? Still got stories, memes, right? But it's the same group been playing with the whole time, right? So you have those. You have all those shared experiences, and it's easy. Like, it's actual friends, right? Which, growing up as a kid, it was like, never talk to strangers on the internet, But like, nowadays, other than people at work, the most people I talk to are
only
strangers on the internet. Strangers on the internet, right? But like, we all know each other's kids' names, hung out, had beer together, like, each other, which is a stark contrast from when I was a kid. But it's just, I think that's honestly the core of the game and always will be. because it's no joke a multiplayer game.
I think I agree 100%. All right, guys. Do we just cut it here? Do we just like end it on this very emotional note?
It's just trying to end it before the waterworks come out.
I don't cry other than in movies.
Alrighty, guys. If anyone has any good questions, feel free to bring them up. I might just be able to bring it up. Other than that, I would say thanks a lot for coming on, and good luck in the war up north. And you know what? If there's a group of 10 supers and there's a war close by, you know, it just ping me, right? I can summon some kikis and we can have some fun.
I can ping you, but I can't promise they won't be dead by the time you get there.
That actually happened. That almost happened to me today. Shines actually went to Brave Stage and just, I don't even know what he did there. He just was like doing weird stuff. And he was in Shield Max, just like fucking around, like looking for stuff. Which more people should be doing, by the way. But ends up some Horde Red on the ESS. Right? We talked about the ESS. Boom, content was created, right? The Horde Red lands and he tackles it. And like he whispers to me, I was like doing something else at the time, but I had my headset on. He's like, oh, there's a Horde Red on this ESS. And we only got so and so many, right? And there's a second Horde Red and a third and a fifth Horde Red at some point and a fax. And then suddenly there's 2 supers. And I was like, okay, now I'm pinging, right? So we're forming. But he lost all the dictators by the time he arrived. And the 2 dictators I sent first, they also died too quick. Because, I mean, the warp in on ESS, you can't warp in, bubble, and then close.
Yeah, it's rough.
So, like, they have a hard time keeping tackle. So they warp their supers all just in time before we arrive with the kikis. With the kiki task force of like 40 dudes. I'm not sure. If they would have formed proper, I think they could have handled a couple kikis, couple max, but I think they didn't have an FC on that was like comfortable doing it. So they warped everything out and we only got like, I think 1 fax, and then they brought a cargo fleet that we killed. But point is, like, all you have to do to get some content, you have to undock and look around, and something can happen, right? And the ESS helps a lot with that too. Alrighty, guys, then.
Yep.
Sorry?
Never mind.
Want to say some last words? No? Alright.
Let's wait for Murray.
I didn't have any closing remarks lined up.
None? Oh, wow.
Go watch my propaganda video for Free Men of the North, and then we'll get that song stuck in your head for the next couple days.
Someone
I don't
link
remember
it.
which one that even was, honestly.
Someone link it. It was actually a good little video. And just general shout out to all of our unnamed logician homies, because armies run on their stomach, so they're putting in effort. They never get enough pats on the back. Alrighty then. Then everyone on stream, thanks for hanging out. If you want a Caracal skin, I do believe these are they're absolutely limited. I'm not sure they will ever get like new ones. Like it's the streamer, the what's it called, partner skins. I think they're limited at least. So in a couple of years, they might be just worth a lot. So good luck getting one of these. There's a code at the end. And thanks again, and see you guys around. Bye.
Yeah, could stick around a little longer. The dank content I thought was going to appear did not, in fact, appear. It was fake news.
Actually, I've had to pee since we began, so I'll be right back.
Yeah. I didn't talk about it on stream, Pando, but the second frat fort that died in D7 it largely died to AB bombers, which I felt you'd appreciate. Oh yeah, I know. But
Are you muted on stream?